Hi, everybody. Welcome into another edition. This is Cross Functionality, the show about coaching, connecting baseball and softball, male and female, hosted by former college baseball and softball players. You can probably guess which one was better than the other. My friend, co host, softball national champion at the University of Alabama, renowned coach, current day. And of course, I always forget this one. She is an accomplished person and author, Cassie Reilly-Boccia.
Thanks,
What up,
Joe.
Bosch?
How's it going? All is good. All is good. Probably better than you guys down in Florida, but all is good up here.
We are slowly making our way back. I'm good. The wind did not blow me away, and I am back after a week off, ready to do another podcast, episode 12, Cross Functionality, talking today about keeping a hitting journal. I was thinking about this last night too, about how easy it is nowadays to keep like a to-do list. Some people still do it the old-fashioned way by hand. Like my mom, for example, likes to keep it running to-do list. My father likes to write things down that he has to do on like little strips of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And me personally, I'm not much of a to-do list kind of guy. Some might differ from that, certainly. But I think there's easy ways to do it digitally and to do it on your tablet, your phone, and on your computer, whatever the case may be. So really, there's no excuse at this point to not keep a hitting journal and to put your thoughts down on that hitting journal. We'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. But first, I have something here. A story that I tweeted to you, Cass, about again at Juntara on Twitter, at Cassie or Coach underscore Cassie RB on Instagram, Coach Cassie RB on Twitter. This is an article by Greg Lawler, and basically it discussed the premise of it was playing multiple sports in your athletic development. I want to get your opinion on this. Growing up, playing a lot of sports. I know you played a lot of sports. I played at one point in my life both hockey and baseball in the spring at the same time. Author Steve Magnus was also mentioned in this article, and he listed some practical takeaways from kids playing multiple sports. And I'm just going to read them really quickly here. Number one, stop over indexing on the early progress of your development. Progress is nonlinear. It often comes in sports and plateaus. Early success can narrow and cement our sense of self, meaning, again, one sport success. Early success often shifts our motivation, and slow progress can be good. Now, again, that slow progress and just progress athletically in general has a lot to do, I think, in a player and a athlete's development growing up in playing multiple sports.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. I don't disagree. I think
How many sports did you play growing up, by the way?
Two, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, I probably didn't play my first actual sport on a team until I was like maybe 10 years old.
Yeah.
That was like the first time I ever like did like a little league thing. Like, I was much older now. It's like there's stuff for 3-year-olds if they want it,
Right.
I was basketball and softball, but looking back, I was in my mom raised me as a single mom until I was about 8, 9, 10 years old. So I was in a before school program and an after school program at school. And that was all we did was kickball, dodgeball, football. Like probably 2 hours, and I loved it. It was like 2 hours straight of just like getting to play on concrete or something. And then you go inside and go to school. So I consider that, like I joke, I'm like, yeah, that was my exposure to multi-sports. But it was certainly once I think it was my freshman, sophomore year in high school hit, I was committed solely just to softball. Now did my training change and it cycled, and I wasn't necessarily playing in games year round, but yeah, I committed myself just to softball right around that sophomore year.
So I'm thinking, looking at some of these practical takeaways, and number 3 really sticks out to me. Early success can narrow and cement our sense of self. And again, before high school and in athletes' development, I think that really, really goes well with just playing one sport. But when you're playing multiple sports, I think you're not only growing physically, but mentally as well. You're expanding a little bit. And that's part of an athlete's development too.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's because there's this debate, right? Do we play multiple sports? Do we play 3 sports, 4 sports, 5 sports, or do you pick one sport? And there's not a blanket answer for every single kid out there. And do I think you need to like specialize and hyper focus in baseball if you're going to make it to Major League Baseball? No, I don't think that's the answer at all. But I do think there's a lot of really tremendous athletic individuals who say, yeah, listen, I played multi-sports all the way through high school and like, look at me now. And I think because of their athleticism, they were able to get away with doing that and being really, really successful in multiple sports. They might've just been that more elite to be able to get away with it. Cause I do think some people who want to play at the next level, they need to train at their craft come high school season and the off season in order to be successful come game time.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's encouraged to try a little bit of everything. I don't think we should start crossing off sports, to say that we need to specialize early. But in the same breath too, there's probably nothing wrong with a kid who's like, no, I'm in love with lacrosse. I want to I want to do this. And, it also depends, I think, on how skill specific the sport is. Someone who plays lacrosse and football, I could argue that like when you're playing football in the fall, you're really training in a way for lacrosse because there's so many similarities. But if you play, football in the fall and then go play baseball in the spring, unless you're a quarterback, like your skill set might not translate as well.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people too will play multiple sports growing, but they have that one sport. That's their main season. For you, softball, right? That's your main spring season, summer. So that's your main sport. You're putting all of your energy into that sport and you're maybe working out in the winter, and everything you do around your development is based on your success and what you're trying to achieve on the softball field, but yet you're playing these other sports as well for additional athletic development. And you brought up a good point there too. A lot of times playing football in the fall does not translate at all to what you're doing on the baseball field and your skill set on the baseball field. They're completely two different things. I had a hitting coach tell me this once, that if you play football and you're not a quarterback or you're not at a skill position, a lot of times you'll lose some bat speed. A lot of times you'll lose some bat quickness. I don't have any science behind it, but there are certain pairings in playing different sports that go with your main sport, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And listen, I think it's athlete specific, and we are, we look at my company thrives on the winter season. We are heavy in baseball, softball athletes from November to February or March. We have like the highest volume of people in our building because they're training for their spring sport. And someone would ask us like, well, do you think it'd be better if they played basketball? And my answer is it really does depend. We have some athletes who, if their sport is softball or their sport's baseball, they're going to go play college, but they are going to burn themselves out if they try to train all year long in one sport. And mentally, basketball is going to be the best thing for them. That has to be our suggestion. Where you have other athletes who are kind of just doing it. They're like, well, it's a cheaper option and this and that, which you can't negate that. It's just they have to accept that you could potentially be getting like a customized, tailored plan, right, to like train on your own at another facility. Or you can say, okay, I'm going to just kind of play just to play. I think also high school is so different from middle school and elementary school. Like those are two separate conversations. And I'm definitely talking a lot more towards the high school athlete right now. But I think when athletes are younger, it's I think encouraging multi-sport is great, but I've also been exposed to athletes who are on 3 different travel teams and can't breathe. So there is obviously always a balance. It's not more of one thing.
That was mentioned in this article too, about how parents spend so much money on travel teams and they're playing on all these teams. They're going here, they're going there, and I think a big part of the article, idea that Greg Lawler was trying to really hammer home was that there can't be any negative that comes from playing different sports when it comes to just overall kid development.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only time is, when maybe a kid is being forced into something, and it's almost like a common sense thing, right? Like, let's not take a kid and make him miserable or make her miserable. And let's not load her up to the point where she can't even go to a friend's birthday party because of how serious her 3rd grade basketball season. You get what I mean? Like, I guess that's like, there has to be a balance. And I wouldn't disagree though, Jim. I think, exposure to multiple sports is awesome. I think the difference is that, whether it's that parents' schedules have gotten busier and there's not as much time outside, or you want to blame media and digital stuff for why kids don't play outside as much, whatever it may be, I feel like anybody who didn't have anything to do inside the house and went and played outside, that was your multi-sport, right? Like, so, and even like, there's just like a certain physical readiness that you expect to see of a 10-year-old. Like a 10-year-old should be running around a lot. And we've seen a lot of kids that don't have that at all. I actually don't even think it's safe at that point to be putting them into multiple sports because their body just, they never did anything for whatever reason growing up. So,
it's that theory of people who might be trying to lose weight who are outside running on concrete. You're just doing more harm than good. You should really be walking because you're not really hurt your knees at that point. Your body just isn't prepared for that.
Yeah, I think it's positive to have a conversation and talk about it, but it's very difficult, I think, to say like this is going to be great for every third grader. This is going to then be great for every fifth grader, and this will be great for every. It's going to be dependent kid to kid, location to location, sport to sport. Sometimes, I do really think you have to take skill specific sports sometimes out of the conversation, especially once you get to high school. You can't say like, yes, me playing basketball is going to skill wise translate to me now being a better baseball pitcher once I'm a 14, 15-year-old athlete,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you brought up something too about kids going outside, and I never told you the story about the Thunderdome growing up that I had. I don't think I ever did on this show. Maybe I did on the lab, but my friends and me in the neighborhood, we used to go down to we called it the Thunderdome. It was a tennis courts, with, the metal cage around it. And we used to just go play roller hockey. We used to take down the net, and those big metal cylinder poles would still be in the middle that they were keeping up the net. We would take that tennis net off and we would play hockey, and we always skate around those. And I tell my mom this all the time. I'm surprised that we didn't hurt ourselves a lot worse than just getting checked and checking each other up against
those metal poles,
or the gate, and the fence, that's how I developed my athletic prowess.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because if I look back at myself personally as an athlete, I was so skill dependent. I was a great hitter. I could catch and throw, but I was not naturally athletic. I was fairly slow. I was a little clumsy with my feet, and basketball helped a ton. That was huge for me in my younger years. That certainly helped for what I needed, So yeah, I think it just depends. It depends on the kid, depends on the athlete, and you kind of go from there. And you start to see, like, really ask yourself, like, all right, is my kid gaining something out of this, or they look a little miserable right now?
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, that article by Greg Lawler, I do think that parents listening should read that article. It is very interesting, and you may learn something. Be sure to subscribe to our show, Cross Functionality. That is cross dash functionality. Please do. Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Softball Strength Academy, the YouTube page, to watch us perform this show every single week. And today, episode 12, we are talking about keeping a hitting journal. I'm very excited to talk to you about this because you posted this on your Instagram. You posted something very similar about keeping a hitting journal on your Instagram at Coach_Cassie RB on Instagram. And with keeping a hitting journal, I mentioned it, alluded to it. It's nowadays, it's easier to do than ever before because you can literally have a journal app on your phone if you're a kid, no matter what the age, and you can record your hitting notes. You can record what you're thinking during your practice session. And I think that it's so vital to, at this point, keep a hitting journal to write down your thoughts and keep just everything in perspective.
Yeah, I recommend it to all my athletes. And if, I'll mess around with a couple of different options with them. I'll add a shared note. So if anyone has an Apple user, you can have a shared note where I update, I say, hey, what's your focus for today? And they'll respond with, I'm struggling with the outside pitch. I want to try to drive opposite field. That seems so simple. And you can be like, hey, is that even a hitting journal? And yes, that's the start of one, at least. It's the start of the practice of reflection. It's the start of the practice of saying, okay, let me document what I've worked on in the month of October. And part of the reason too is, I have athletes right now who are like, I feel great. My confidence is high. Awesome. Like, wouldn't it be nice for the next time you start to feel low to be able to go back and be like, what was I doing when I was feeling well, and try to rewrite that. I honestly, I didn't plan this. I just realized when I was 11, if anyone's watching on YouTube, one of my friends gave this to me as a present, and my first journal entry is from
you gotta read it.
2002. Wow. It was going over runner awareness. I was trying to write plays, apparently for bunt coverage, and that's I guess where it started.
What was the date?
2002. So 1/11/2002.
January. Wow.
So this is 20 years old. I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
I was in 6th grade. People can guess my age based off that. I was in 6th grade at St. Joan of Arc School.
Yeah, I was 6th or 7th.
That was right. That was right after 9/11. Actually, now that I think about it, 20
Yep.
years old. Why did you keep that?
I don't know. It was just neat. Like I have a bunch of different.
Okay, so what else is in it? Has it progressed?
Well, okay, so I think I must have taken a break. I have a couple from 2002, a couple from 2003, but then 2004 hits, and that was my first year of high school ball. So this is this is 05. So April 1st, 2005, Yorktown at Horace Greeley. We lost 3-0. I wrote down what I did in my at-bats, when I got a hit, if I struck out, and then I wrote notes on the pitcher. And then I did it for the next 3 games too. And then I guess I wrote down bat at 45-degree angle on your shoulder helped you get on plane. So there you go. 2005, Cassie. And
you also, wow. And you were saying on plane back then.
I guess so.
You had advanced hitting knowledge in 2005.
I had, I had coaches. Yeah, I definitely had coaches help out with that. And then, so it just seems like it was like a random notebook after that with like some notes here and there. My first visit at Alabama.
Oh,
how about that?
You got to read that.
Okay. This was, let's see. This was Alabama 2000. Oh no, that was the fall. So this was my visit was then here. Friday, February 16th. It was flew down from Philly to Chicago, then to Birmingham. Got to talk to Coach Patrick Murphy. Got caught in traffic. Missed a meeting with the president because of traffic. Finally got there. Got to meet Murphy in the parking lot, and he gave us all hugs instead of a handshake. That's the journal entry.
And you've told that story before about.
I know.
Yeah.
So pretty neat.
That is pretty neat. You kept it this long. So that actually is a perfect segue into what actually goes into a hitting journal.
Right. That kind of turned into like a little bit of everything journal, right? That was, I guess, my practice for my hitting journal. I would say I didn't really nail my like a hitting journal, I think, until my senior year of college. I think I flirted with like, putting stuff around here and there, and finally was like, I said to myself, I'm like, why am I putting it in so many different places? Why am I typing sometimes, doing this? And I got a real journal. And I think this is stuff that like worked for me, but every single day at practice or a game, I wrote down one mental goal and one physical goal. And again, I like writing. I like the physical active writing. It's almost a little therapeutic for me, but you could have an audio journal where someone voice records. You could have like notes on your phone. It could be something that just helps you reflect later on. But the mental and physical goal helped me because especially once you get to college, how many practices you've gone through, how many games you go through, things start to blend together a little bit. But when you get to go back and be like, okay, my specific, I might have a 4-hour practice day, but my specific focus is directional extension to the opposite field gap. All of a sudden you can kind of like, that's your cornerstone where you're like kind of wrapping everything you do around, okay, am I getting better at that? And then your mental goal, I think, can help just keep you focused too. So that was always a staple pre-hitting. I would use a journal when I was watching film. I wanted to know what the pitcher was throwing on her first strike, when she was ahead in the count, when she was behind in the count, and then what the hitters who were successful were doing. So I think it's a little bit more common in softball. You'll see hitters, crowd the plate, move up in the box, back in the box. It just seems they might move around a little bit more than what you would naturally see baseball players doing. And then post game, you can, I would always add time for reflection. And I used to try to be like very, almost like what I thought I should be writing. And then when I finally just said, you know what, I'm pissed off right now. I had a really crappy game and I'm going to write about how pissed off I am about this crappy game. And it wasn't, so that might be right after the game. And then the next day I could go back and be like, okay, what can I take out of that? A couple other things I had in there. Gosh, I would have a confidence resume and it would say, I, Cassie Reilly-Boccia, have earned the right to be confident because, and it was, save that for a rainy day when you're not feeling great, be able to go back and reflect on that. Pitches I like to hit in my hit zone. I would have a huge strike zone essentially, or what I like to call a hit zone, because I don't like to strike is negative to a hitter. Really, I wanted it to be my hit zone because it might vary from an umpire's strike zone. So if I like crush a low inside pitch and I was really proud of it, I would go back to that like hit zone, and in that spot, I'd write down the date and what the hit was. And then just maybe a couple other like quotes anytime, and a teammate told me an affirmation that meant a lot. Some, things to reflect on. I did write a letter to myself one time after a slump. Dear future self, I'm sorry you're reading this. You must be in a slump again. Here's how you got out of it last time.
I'm learning a lot today from about you and from keeping I might have to just keep a life journal when I'm not feeling well one day,
Yeah.
or I have a bad performance on a podcast. You just had a really bad performance on a podcast. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. Good going, dope, something like that.
Yeah.
It's
I guess it was
interesting.
good reflection.
Some athletes, some people, they're spatial learners. Other people are auditory learners, but it seems like a hitting journal kind of combines the two,
Mm,
brings it all together for you. And like you mentioned, it's kind of like the word of the show. It helps you reflect as a hitter.
mm. Yeah, and I really do try to. It is a practice and it's a habit. And like I said, I really didn't get into a really consistent habit until I was almost 22 years old. Right? It was like I just said, I had a haphazard post two, 3 times one year, and I picked the journal back up and do it again. So I think you want to pick something that you have access with a lot. The journal was small enough that I could toss in my bag. It had a really strong covering on the outside. It wasn't flimsy, so it got protected. But the one thing people don't live without is their phone.
Right.
So if you did want to do a notes thing or a Google Sheet or something that is just ongoing, that's as long as it's dated and you can kind of go back and say, well, wait a second, last time we played this team, I wanted to go back and check my notes. I wanted to go back and check how I felt, what worked, what didn't work, because it becomes a long season, and it's even at the high school level. College, gosh, we had access to film. Like that's not always accessible for travel ball and all that. So I do think it's you want to make it something that can be accessible to you, whether you want to carry a small journal around or you want your phone to be it. I think the two are good options for that.
Well, to me too, there's so many things. I mean, baseball players, softball players, they tend to have a little bit of OCD, and it's a good way. Keeping a hitting journal, pitchers may do the same thing too. I'm not saying they shouldn't keep a pitching journal, but hitting, because baseball, softball, it's such a game of failure, and it's a way of self-talk. Keeping a hitting journal, it's a way of truly disseminating your thoughts and getting you back to the point where you need to be mentally so you can perform physically.
Yes, yeah. I think it's very underrated how effective it can be. Because how many times do you talk to a hitter or an athlete and they're like, man, I feel so much better after I just had a conversation with a coach.
Yeah.
Well, like a journal is essentially a conversation with you. It's a way for you to get it out. Because again, the second you get it out of your head, you're not feeling like you have to live with it in your head. It's like, okay, I don't have to worry about it. I've put it down somewhere permanent where I don't have to worry about remembering it. So sometimes that just, like I said, it helps a ton. It's a different way of reflecting. It's almost like talking to the coach version of you, because in so many ways, we probably are so much harder on ourselves than we would ever be on anyone else in our life. So it's unfortunate because we could be a phenomenal teammate to others, but a really bad teammate to ourselves. And I think that journal and that reflection is almost an opportunity for us to be a really good teammate to ourselves again, which is really important.
And it's almost like we've talked about this before on the show, having an alter ego, an athlete alter ego. It's almost like you're talking to that athlete alter ego in putting down those thoughts in the journal.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's like there really shouldn't be too many rules like attached to it. It should really try to be like something that you enjoy doing. It shouldn't feel like a burden. It should be like, okay, I actually operate best drawing the strike zone, and that helps me, or I operate best with this. And you figure out what works, and as long as you can stick with it. And like I said, the second it becomes a burden and feels like a chore, you're going to want to skip it. You're not going to look forward to it. Like this should be something where you pick it up and you're like, okay, I have 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is that I just write before and write afterwards. And funny enough, I actually don't have my hitting journal from college with me right now because I lend it to my athletes now. And this thing it looks almost like a Bible, but there's so many other pages that were thrown in, and it's 10 years old. It's been passed around. It was in my bag all the time. So it's a little bit falling apart. Yeah. And it's funny because anytime an athlete would borrow it, I'll get a picture from one of them and she strapped it into the front seat of her car, like sitting there. She's like, I'll keep it safe. But hopefully people can get ideas of like what they want to write or what they can be writing or how they can be looking at their hitting or reflecting on that. I think is important.
Yeah. Email us too if you have any questions about this, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. And anything can really go in there when it comes to hitting, like certain drills, because there's so much emphasis now. Drill. Let's do this drill. Let's do this drill. But we have to figure out which drills work for which hitters. And the best way to do that, and for a hitter to understand that and something to go back to, reference point, is by keeping that journal.
Yeah. Gosh, absolutely. And that's funny. I almost forgot I used to do that. In the off season when we weren't playing and we were just practicing, I still journaled after every practice. And I remember if there was a drill that like, just, I don't know, just made me feel good. And like we've talked about that, that's smooth, it felt simple. I'd write that down and I'd like highlight it in the top or on the margin because I would say, I want this to be my pregame drill. And I think it's important that when hitters start to get into season, we're no longer needing before a game to be doing drills that are trying to correct something about your swing. Like that should have been done. That's done during the week. That's done whatever it needs to be. We're at the game. This is our swing, and we need to be doing drills that are helping us with our timing, with our confidence, with where we want to hit the pitch out in space. How do I get my sequencing just to flow? Opposed to being like really rigid and technique based. You know, that's not a game day vibe that we're trying to match. So I think that's important too, to start identifying like, this is a really good day drill for maybe on Monday to rewire. This is a good drill for a Wednesday to solidify that rewire. And then, you know, come Friday mornings and I'm playing Friday night, this is the drill I want to be doing.
Right. It simplifies things.
I think so.
So many times. Yeah. You mentioned sequencing in there too, and keeping detailed notes about at bats, right? I mean, that's kind of what it's also for, is to keep detailed notes about your bats and reference that, whether it's good or bad, that can help you later on if you're facing the same team, facing the same pitcher, or just trying to, as you put before, break out of a slump.
Yes. Yeah. No. You know what? Watching film is a little bit of a skill, because people can watch film and just be like, like, what am I looking for here? Like, we're just watching the same picture over and over. But like,
if you don't have an actual approach to doing that, you're just wasting time.
Exactly. Yeah. And so again, that took me some time to figure out, but like once you figure that out, I specifically remember like right before we played Tennessee at the World Series, I drew the strike zone or the hit zone and I circled one spot and I was like, this is it. She's going to come here for a lefty. Like, I just was so confident in that. And sure enough, like when it happens, you stand up on second base after that double and you're like, yeah, like I studied for that. You know, it's a very rewarding feeling that it's not just, oh, I'm playing checkers out here. It's like a whole nother level of chess that you're adding to your game. And you know what, listen, there's going to be some people who say you're making hitting too complicated. Just get up to the plate and crush. I get it. But some people, I think, are going to benefit from that. This is an advantage. This should be a tool for an advantage, not to overthink or not to, this should be something that is, hey, this falls in line with my personality and these types of things help me. And you go from there.
Yeah. I never got that, by the way, that people who say that crowd of just go up there and hit, just go up there and, see the ball, hit the ball. I hate that saying. It's not that easy, right? Well, first of all, scientifically, you don't actually see the ball hit the bat. It's impossible. Correct. Ted Williams said that.
Yep. Which is so impressive. He said that. Yeah.
Cassie,
the fact that he knew that back then.
but I mean, you're telling me like Pete Rose said, oh, I just go up there and I see the ball and I hit the ball. Well, you were looking at scouting reports 3 hours before the game. So you're referencing something. So keeping a hitting journal is not making hitting complicated for those out there who think that. It's actually helping you if it's used the right way. It's a great tool to continue to evolve as a hitter.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And funny enough, anybody who's criticized, because granted, like when you post on social media, you're putting yourself out there, right? And there's definitely been some criticisms, but there's been certain criticisms that say you're making hitting too complicated. It's just see it and hit it, right? And I have to imagine that have not ever gone to that like ultra successful level where hitting got really, really hard, because how many times, and this is anybody's played at a high level, you all of a sudden aren't really facing the pitcher, you're facing the pitch caller, whether that's the catcher or the pitching coach. And that's different.
That's facing three people at once.
It completely changes the game. Yeah. Or B, they just are, they are maybe coaching at a younger level or they stop playing and they're maybe at that younger level where you can just see it and hit it, hitting when it is, how nice it is, right? To face not that competitive pitching, to just be able to go see it and hit it,
right.
So who knows?
Yeah. Well, I was listening to Tim Kirchin do the Blue Jays game last night against the Mariners, and he made a great point. He said, I don't know how hitters nowadays hit fastballs coming at them at 98 miles per hour, and then all this off-speed stuff. Pitchers are so good nowadays. So really, you're not facing just the pitcher. And if you don't go up there with some sort of plan, you're done. You're screwed. You're cooked. But one of the ways that personally, with everything, all the information that's out there and provided for you at the major league level and on the softball side at the highest level of the NCAA at the collegiate level, with all that information that's out there, something that is personalized to you that could help you even more with your success as, again, a reference point is that hitting journal.
Right. And honestly, I think pitchers could probably do the same thing. Like pitchers can keep their pitching journal, and still have that reflection. Yeah. I often think, I witness it every day. Velo University is my business partner's pitching performance throwing, which really now evolved into throwing, but he works with a ton of pitchers, right? And specifically baseball pitchers, but to see how much pitching like knowledge has progressed in that sport, and the spin rate and the vertical dropping on like every single thing that you can measure to try to evade a hitter's bat, that has evolved like crazy. Right. We have to keep up as hitters. We have to, because if not, we're going to just be chopped to pieces. And I don't like giving pitchers credit. I think it's just more of a hitter's mentality. I always try to, we're already at a disadvantage at hitters. I don't like to give pitchers even more credit. It's just, I really just try to protect my hitters sometimes, especially because, pitchers get very confident. And I say, that hitter, if you threw him 10 overhand front toss balls, is not going to go 10 for 10. So you cannot take credit for all your outs, because some of them are just because hitting's really freaking hard.
Yeah. So, sometimes there's a ball that's hit 110 miles per hour off the bat right at somebody. Right. I mean, then there's the bloopers. I remember, now that you brought that up, I read the book about the baseball steroid era by Kurt, I forget his last name now, but it was mentioned in the book how there was a hitter, I forget who the hitter was, allegedly on performance enhancing drugs. And the hitter, he broke his bat and looped it into center field. And that pitcher at the time said, man, this is just, because everybody knew that they were on the performance enhancing drugs, right? And that pitcher said out loud on the mound, man, this just isn't fair. And now I fast forward years later in 2018, or maybe it was 2017, Bryce Harper hit a broken bat home run at Citi Field over the wall in right center. Yep. Right. So this idea that, that hitters had the advantage back then, even when they were doing performance enhancing drugs, pitchers have always had the advantage in baseball and softball. Mm-hmm. I don't care what anybody says. They always will have the advantage because they're not failing 7 times out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, 100%. And until you see the average hitter hitting, what would that be, like 600? Yeah, 600. 400 to 600, right? Like until that happens, like because right, even at 400, pitchers still are winning a majority of the time.
Exactly. Yeah, 60% of the time, the pitchers are still better than you.
Right. So and I explain that to my hitters too. Granted, you don't base all success off of batting average, but it's very easy to just, I ask some of my hitters, do you know how batting average is even calculated? And believe it or not, a lot of my softball girls have no idea. I was like, okay, well, listen, if you had 10 at bats and you had 4 hits, you'd be batting 400. And they know, like, they might not know how it's calculated, but they know what's good and what's not good, right? Mm-hmm. And I explain how Major League Baseball around 300, you're going to the Hall of Fame. If you're in college and you're batting a little over 400, you're probably going to be in that All-American conversation. And, high school ball just depends on what area of the country you're living in, right? So I said, listen, if you're batting 400 in college, would you be happy? And they're like, heck yeah, that's awesome. And I said, cool. If you got a 4 out of 10 on a test, would you be home celebrating? And they're like, oh, no. Like if they got a 40 on a test, and I'm like, well, what if it was the highest score? That just means the test is so hard. It just means it's that much more challenging. So it's just putting in perspective for them how difficult hitting is, and how, because every athlete I say, hey, what's your goal? Consistency. I'm like, great. Let's define it, because you chose the most inconsistent thing you could do. Let's define what consistency looks like. So
if Tom Brady goes 4 for 10 to begin the game, if Jalen Hurts goes 4 for 10 to start the game, both quarterbacks at the highest level of football in the NFL, if they start 4 for 10, that's really, really bad. Right. People are going to be looking at them like, whoa, that's what are they, like Sam Darnold now or something, right? Mm-hmm. That's really bad. If LeBron starts 4 for 10 from the field, that's not very good. You're 4 for 10 in baseball. You're 4 for your last 10. You're on hot. You're hot. Yeah,
you're doing You're doing well. Yeah, you're in a good spot. You feel good about yourself. Yeah.
You're part of the sponsored TV segment, Who's Hot or whatever, sponsored by, like, I don't know, fucking Chili's or something.
So I do preach that to my hitters. And I think at the end of the day, I say, okay, well, if a majority of the time you're going to be failing, not succeeding, even when you're at your best, you're going to be failing more than you're succeeding, then we have to actually get better at failing than we do succeeding in order to be consistent in the sport. And things like the hitting journal, things like, other like mental performance aspects that we've talked about, like branching outside of just see it and crush it is what I think is going to lead to that success for sure.
What was that saying you just said?
What's that?
Failing. Well, failing. I
so
don't want.
if-
I think I know. I know what you said. I don't want to get it wrong.
No, okay. I want to make sure I say it right. So if we are going to be failing more than we're succeeding, even when we're at our best, we have to start being really good at failing. We have to get better at failing than we do even succeeding.
I
That was
think
the
that's
idea.
I think that's a great place to end today's topic.
There you go. Deal.
Episode 12, Keeping a Hitting Journal. Any questions, email us jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. Next week, we are discussing pushing away negative thoughts because baseball and softball, those sports stink. There's a lot of negativity around it.
Yeah, agreed.
So we'll be talking about that episode 13 next week. Jake and I on the Lab Epstein Hitting podcast are breaking down Mike Trout's swing this week. So please go ahead and listen to that. Subscribe, Apple, Google, Spotify, and watch on the Lab Epstein Hitting podcast page. And leave your comments if you'd like.
Awesome. All right. And then check out Softball Strength Academy on Instagram, at Softball Strength Academy. Got a lot of good info coming down the pipeline this week.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. Any tease, any preview?
Shoot, I just reviewed about a month's worth of content, but I remember I was super excited about this week. No, I don't have a specific one that I know for sure is not going to be incorrect. I might have to give away the next 3 weeks, but yes, we're focusing a lot more on the mental aspects, which is interesting because usually people I think come to us for the physical, and then when we hear feedback, it's hey, I didn't really know how to incorporate the mental, so that's really what we're trying to focus in on a lot now. That
all right,
the plate. Yep.
All right, very good. Well, thank you for listening and watching, everybody. Again, subscribe and watch us on Softball Strength Academy YouTube page, and we will talk to you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.